we review the new Mizuno Pro 24 series. What's the tech and how do they perform? So here we have the new Mizuno Pro range. We're going the 241, 243 and 245, which take over from the 221, 223 and 225. So going to run through them in each order, take you through the differences and where they've changed from the previous model and what you can expect to find out of them. So we'll start with the 241, which is a very pretty beast, you know, a very classic blade shape. You can see from toe end on, there's a good bit of muscle behind the strike point, a good bit of change in width of the blade there. You know, going back to a very, very classic shape, this really resembles the MP5, and actually many people have said of the 243, that's the MP25 shape. Very, very similar looking heads there. Ultimately, 241 is a blade. There's not an awful lot you can do with the blade head to move weight around, make it that much more forgiving. You know, the weight sits right on the back of the face. There's no massive MOI you can add to it. So it's really about how do you improve the consistency, solidity of feel. The visual's actually a very, very important part. So running through on this head, Mizuno have kept the copper underlay on all of the models. That's part of that softer feel that they're going for. It helps just to tone the sound down and make it feel that little bit softer, which is something that, you know, that tagline, nothing feels like a Mizuno, that's something they've really gone after. Other elements of, say, technology or factors that all the heads have, they've all gone very slightly more compact on shape, particularly in the shorter arms. They've neatened up the top line very slightly, neatened up the toe line a fraction, but into the shorter arms, slightly smaller heads than the previous model. One of the other aspects of these is they've worked on the grind, on the sole shape. So, you know, that back edge just trails off a little bit more. The leading edge is a little bit rounder. So versatility of turf interactions with the sole of the club, something they focused on really, really heavily in this series, particularly in the longer arms of each of the models. When you go into the 243 and 245, just shaping that back edge stops it getting too wide, helps the club go through the turf a little bit more smoothly. So back to the 241. So main changes really are, you know, they've got that solid bit of mass behind the strike. So they've centered a little bit more mass right in the middle, just to give you that solidity of contact and really solid feel. And so slightly neater shape. There's not an awful lot one can do with a blade head. So, you know, slightly thinner top line, a little bit more compact, so the mass sits right behind where you want it to give it as solid a feel as possible, and tune the sound for that solid feel too. So again, the layering of the materials, you go from, you know, the base carbon steel, then you've got a layer of nickel, then you've got the copper layer, then you've got another layer of nickel, and then you've got the chrome that sits on top. And the chrome is what gives you that beautiful kind of shined up finish, but also a bit of longevity as well. So, you know, really what we'll do is have a hit, and then you know, there's not, say, tech-wise in a blade, they're not pretending to do much. They're really looking at the shaping, a little bit of weight position, and a bit of sound. So very, very classic shape. You can certainly feel there's a little bit more mass behind the strike point. I think you know, possibly on the 221s, if you were looking for a criticism of the head, there was possibly not quite as solid a gutsy feel at contact as previous models have had. And this certainly, you know, having that extra bit of mass right behind the strike point gives you that. Yeah, really just very classic, very clean shaped, slightly neater shaped than previous models. You know, you get a mid spin off a blade, it's not a low spin head. You're never going to get that from a blade head. So it'll carry a little bit more flight, a little bit more stopping power than some of the other models. Very, very neutral. You know, data that I've got off there, you know, 17 launch, 5,000 spin. I'm not a high spinner with my irons now. So, you know, something like that just helps to retain a little bit of flight, but just a classic, solid feeling, neat shaped blade. This one is done in left-handed, so 3 to pitch in right-handed in the 241s and 4 to pitch in left-handed. So blade for the lefties. Moving into the 243. Now this is where we start to get a little bit more of a change in the technology. So we're retaining that mass behind the strike here. So you can see a bit of thickness to the sole there, and retaining that mass centered behind strike. The badge in the back here that's a tuning implement. So it's really designed to affect the sound of the head and covers up. There's a channel in the back. So with the 243 series, where they've developed the head there is a channel cut down sort of through the back there, so in behind that muscle. There's a progressive channel, so from 8 iron down, it's a solid one-piece head. Same as the 223, that was exactly the same. But the difference here is, rather than going multi-material construction, they've made the channel a little bit deeper, a little bit wider, so that you get a little bit more of a progression of ball speed. Something that Mizuno with these models are doing is really trying to avoid combo sets. They're developing the combo and the progression within each model of the 243 and 245. So there's a progressive channel. So 8 to pitch is one-piece head, and then the 6 and 7 is slightly thinner face, or slightly thinner face than the 223 with that bit of a channel, and then progressed a little bit more in the 4 and the 5 iron to get, again, a little bit more speed, a little bit more, slightly more height, but certainly to extend that speed progression through the set. So really, it's a bit of a blended set. So they're really trying to avoid mix and matching with the heads. Similar to the 241s, we've got that beveled back edge. I'll hold that a little bit closer. Just see that back edge just shaped off. And that again helps that turf interaction, and in the long runs where the weight sits a bit deeper than the blades, that again stops that back edge catching and helps it to glide through the turf. Similar little bit of beveling on the leading edge to the 241s as well. One of the main differences on this head is that they've incorporated chromalloy into it. Now, they have this on the 245 as well. It's a material that's utilised in the JPX range. So what chromalloy is, it's a low alloy steel. So rather than the mild carbon steels that you get, which are the sort of the standard forged heads, there are some different alloys and materials within that. So what that does, it's got a higher strength ratio. So than mild carbon steel, so it can be made a little bit more durable, it can be hardened up a little bit more, so again there's a bit more resistance to corrosion, and allows some of the materials to get a little bit stronger. So from a structural point of view, it makes the frame as stiff and as solid and strong as possible, which means they can utilise the face tech, get a little bit more rebound, so all the energy is going back into the ball rather than dissipating through the frame of the head. What it does do is it does affect the sound a little bit. So that's one of the aspects. I'll hit this now, that we will do a comparison video between the 2.2 series and the 2.4 series, but it's something where in order to gain on the one hand, something has to give on the other. And this instance, the ball speed, there is a little bit of a ball speed gain, but there's a little bit more of a click off the face too. So hitting this, a little bit low on the face, but it's a slightly harder sound and feel. Yes, you gain forgiveness versus the blade head. That was a pretty ropey strike, but still retained reasonable efficiency. So it's definitely that little bit of a harder note because of the structure on the head. I'll get one more slightly cleaner hit. Better contact. So there's a little bit more of that kind of pop, slightly higher pitched note off the face. So on the blade head, the loft on the blade 6 iron loft is 30 degrees. We're at 28 on this. There's a little bit of a ball speed gain off that. But on the blade, I was getting a 1.4 efficiency on the centered strike. With that, it's 1.44. One of the other aspects is the spin's about 400 revolutions lower, so it's a bit of a stronger flight off this head as well from a spin standpoint. So retains reasonable launch angle, but we're going to see the spin down a little bit more on this. So certainly designed to give a bit of progression on ball speed, a bit of progression on distance, but with that we're going to see a slightly hotter spin ratio as well. Now this model, where in previous models the 223 was done left-handed, this one is not. So it's just the 221 and, which we're coming on to now, the 225. And this is done in right-handed 4-through gap wedge, and that 243. 245 model now, this is the hollow body construction, so it looks like a blade. It has that very, very classic, very similar look to the MP5, to the 241 in terms of that muscle shaping, but then has that thicker walled hollow construction to it. So again, it's a very It's a very pretty head. They've really done, I think, the shaping and the neatness of the head is great. It's a slightly, where this will show camera, that top edge there is slightly chamfered and beveled, so it's slightly angled. And what that does is that provides a slightly neater look at a dress. So this is something they've kept the slightly tighter shape all the way through in the short runs, whether it's a 241, 243 or 245. So slightly neater shape than previous models, but being a hollow body, you're still going to see a reasonable bit of top line at a dress. So that's something that's unavoidable because of the construction of the head. So 245s, again, got the chromaloy in it. So that, again, that's that harder, stronger material, a little bit more resilient, stiffens the frame of the head. That sort of partly facilitates some of the tech that's gone into them. So with the 245, you've got a 9 and pitch that are, they don't go the solid construction like the 243 does, but they don't have the sort of tungsten that they do higher up the set. So what you have is the sort of main frame of the face and the hosel, and then a stainless steel backplate and the 9 and the pitch. And then when you go to the 8 iron, you go to more of the hollow construction as it does through the rest of the set, but without the tungsten. When you go from 7 iron up, there's a 47 gram tungsten slug that sits at the bottom. So what they've done is they created what they call a floating piece of tungsten, which sits not right on the bottom, slightly above, but as close to the bottom as they possibly can to get that centre of gravity down the bottom of the head, get the flight up. That the thinner sole helps create a little bit of ball speed, a little bit of flexion, a little bit of kick, but keeps the centre of gravity low, keeps the flight up. So it's a 30 gram in the 225, is a 47 gram in the 245. So quite a considerable, 50% uplift in the amount of tungsten sat in the head. That means a little bit better energy transfer when it's low on the face because you've got more mass at the bottom, and a little bit more forgiveness. So they're calling it a suspended tungsten weight within the head. And then that transition of hollow but no tungsten into more of a kind of still a two-piece construction in the bottom end. They have on this head as well, on the face, they've gone a variable thickness face, so they've got a Cortec face, which is sort of almost a cross pattern, much like they would in a driver face. You get a thinner outside and a thicker middle, really for a bit of resilience out the middle of the face, but to optimize ball speeds across the face as well. And that's something that's developed off the 225, sorry, Freudian slip. And the 225 had this as well, but they've modified it from that to try and achieve a little bit more ball speed. So it's a slightly modified shaping of that face. And again, tuning the acoustics, trying to get it feeling as soft and solid and soft. Two different characteristics, but they always try and achieve those on all of the heads. This one, it is available 4 through gap wedge in left-handed and in right-handed from the gap wedge all the way through to a 2 iron. So really extended set, and this is one that's going to be used in the driving iron a lot of the times for the right-handers. So I'll give this one a hit. And this one, 6 iron loft, 27 degrees, so a little bit stronger as standard than the 243. So still a very classic shape, albeit with that slightly thicker top line. But again, being a hollow construction, that just makes the sound, the acoustics, a little bit more reverberated around, and create a little bit more of a note off the head versus the solid one piece that you get on the 241. So from a ball speed point of view, a little bit, I'm not going to be too dissimilar to the 243. I think what you definitely gain is the forgiveness. Relative to loft, kept a reasonable launch angle onto there, but very slightly stronger spin again than the 243 by a couple of hundred revs. Now some of that is that loft, just sitting that degree lower. But again, the more weight you put at the bottom of the head, the more you bring the center of gravity down, the more likely I'll hold it that way up, the more likely you are to strike it slightly above that line, which keeps the spin a little bit lower, which is why the blade spins more, because the center of gravity sits higher up the head. So you tend to get a bit more gearing up the face from a spin point of view. The lower that center of gravity is, the more the ball strikes above it, it gears the head back a little bit of contact, takes the spin off. So that's why you always get a lower backspin out of a lower center of gravity head, although you might get a higher launch. So something certainly seeing the certainly from a tech point of view, updating the heads, maneuvering, manipulating the amount of weight, where it sits, the construction of the heads. There's definitely progression from that point of view. You know, the spin coming down, it'll be interesting to see how that affects as we get them in the fitting bays and get people hitting them, how suitable that is. I think it's going to be good for a number of people, not so good for others. But you know, really classic shaped head, very pretty classic kind of shaping, really neaten them up a little bit, which is really going to suit the Mizuno fan. We'll see how they go. You know, following a very good model in the 2.2 series, it's been very successful for them. Will this be successful? Time will tell.